Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we travel to the most mysterious place on Earth, Antarctica. A land of endless ice that hides its deepest secrets beneath 2 miles of frozen silence. Beneath that ice lies the story of a world that existed 12,800 years ago, before the great cataclysm that changed everything. Ancient maps once showed this continent without ice. Enormous structures still sleep below the frozen surface. And for over 60 years, a quiet conspiracy has kept those discoveries in the dark. This is the story they never wanted you to know. The story of Antarctica before ice. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what we do here, exploring the hidden chapters of history, lost civilizations, and the mysteries that time forgot. No pressure, no hype, just calm curiosity. If stories like this help you reflect, rest, or drift peacefully to sleep, then your support means the world to me. Now, dim the lights, take a deep breath, and let the story begin. Antarctica before ice. Lost cities under 2 miles of snow. Beneath 2 miles of Antarctic ice lies a secret that could rewrite human history. Once, long before explorers in heavy coats and frozen beards stepped onto this continent, it was a world of rivers, forests, and warmth. Today, Antarctica is a frozen wilderness, 14 million square kilometers of ice and wind, holding 70% of Earth's fresh water, yet almost none of its life. The coldest temperature ever recorded here was minus 89.2 degrees Celsius, a chill so deep that even sound seems to freeze mid-air. But hidden within this endless white desert are traces of something older, something astonishing, a continent that wasn't always frozen. Millions of years ago, Antarctica sat closer to the equator. It basked in sunlight, surrounded by oceans teeming with life. Fossilized ferns, pollen grains, and even tree trunks have been found locked beneath the ice, whispering of ancient forests that swayed in warm breezes. Scientists drilling deep into the ice have uncovered cores that act like time machines, cylinders of frozen history stretching back 2 million years. In the Allen Hills region, ice cores reveal shifting climates, warm periods when rain fell instead of snow, and green valleys spread where glaciers now stand. Imagine standing there 12,000 years ago. The air would have been crisp but breathable, the sky soft with clouds, and the land alive with moss, grass, perhaps even small animals wandering by the lakes. Then something changed, a slow, merciless shift in Earth's balance. The poles tilted, ocean currents rearranged, and the warmth drained away. Ice crept outward year by year until the land vanished beneath it. But here's what haunts the imagination of historians and scientists alike. Some maps, drawn long before modern exploration, seem to remember the lost version of Antarctica. In 1513, a man named Fury Rees sat in his cabin aboard an Ottoman ship and drew a map. He wasn't a scientist, nor an explorer of Antarctica. The continent hadn't even been officially discovered yet. Yet his map, when rediscovered centuries later, showed something extraordinary.
What is this
At the
place?
southern edge of the
I
parchment,
have never seen
drawn
these
with
waters.
delicate ink lines,
Could it be the new
was a
world?
coastline
Look here. These
unmistakably
islands are
resembling
unknown.
Antarctica.
The currents are marked for a passage
without
west.
ice.
This map changes everything
Mountains,
we know.
rivers, and valleys were marked as if someone had sailed along them in warm weather. How could a 16th century sailor have drawn what no one was supposed to know? When scientists from the U.S. Air Force analyzed the Piri-Reis map in 1960, they were
These glacial
astonished.
contours align precisely with the
Beneath
Piri-Reis
Antarctica's
annotations.
2
This
mile
suggests a
thick
much
ice,
earlier expedition than
radar
previously
surveys revealed mountain ranges and valleys that matched the ancient drawing almost perfectly. Could it be coincidence? Or had someone seen this land before it froze? Historians debated fiercely. Some claimed Reis had copied older Greek or Phoenician maps, now
The
lost to
Phoenicians
time.
never reached this far west.
Others
the text
whispered
is clear.
of
But the Hellenic maps
civilizations
show
forgotten.
clear trade routes through the pillars.
Ones
Don't
advanced
count.
enough
The Phoenician
to
trade
chart
routes
the
never
globe
extended this
long
far
before
west. The
ours.
evidence is clear on the scroll.
But the
You
truth
ignore
may
the
lie
artifacts found in
somewhere
Greece.
quieter.
The Hellenes navigated these
Somewhere
waters before the
under
Phoenicians.
the ice.
The evidence is clear.
In the Allen Hills and Vostok regions, scientists drilled deep and pulled up transparent cylinders of ice, time capsules of climate. Each layer held air bubbles older than civilization itself,
We have the sample.
tiny
It looks
prisms
perfect.
for ancient atmospheres.
Let's get this logged immediately before
Through
the
them,
temperature shifts.
Scientists read the story
This sample
of Earth's
is perfectly
heartbeat,
preserved.
cycles
The
of
deepest
warmth
blue
and
yet.
cold, of breath and stillness. Around 12,000 years ago, they found a sudden drop, a sharp line in chemistry, marking when temperatures collapsed and ice began its reign. That line coincides with the end of the last great ice age and the mysterious global flood myths shared by distant cultures. From Sumer to Egypt, from Maya to Inuit, stories speak of a deluge that swallowed cities whole. Could the frozen silence of
rising.
Antarctica
Hurry!
hide
Keep moving.
one of those
Don't look
lost
back.
cities?
We have to reach
Buried
the top.
not by war, but by time? Beneath the weight of 2 miles of ice, radar hints at geometric shapes, right angles, and formations that shouldn't exist in nature. Scientists call them anomalies. Dreamers call them ruins. Whatever they are, they remind us that history is fragile, and that sometimes the truth sleeps. In the 21st century, our machines began to dream beneath the ice. Satellites circled overhead, bouncing radar signals into the frozen heart of Antarctica. What they found was beyond imagination. Hidden lakes sealed for millions of years, rivers flowing in darkness, and mountain ranges higher than the Alps buried in total silence. One of them, Lake Vostok, lies beneath nearly 2 miles of ice and holds water untouched since before humans learned to write. Inside, scientists detected traces of microbial life, ancient, slow, and adapted to eternal cold. To study them, researchers must drill carefully, ensuring not to contaminate what might be the last untouched ecosystem on Earth. Imagine a world beneath our world, breathing in the dark, untouched by sunlight for millions of years. As more ice-penetrating radars sweep across the continent, strange echoes return. Some appear geometric, straight lines, grid-like patterns, unnatural symmetry. To scientists, they are data points to be explained. To dreamers, they are whispers of buried cities. If such cities existed, they would now sleep beneath over 2 million years of snow. The pressure alone could crush skyscrapers into dust. Yet the idea persists that once humanity, or something like it, walked there freely. In 2025, new surveys using satellite gravimetry and magnetic field imaging began to reveal more detail. Under the ice sheet, scientists mapped voids, massive hollow chambers stretching for miles. Were they natural caves formed by volcanic heat, or something built? We don't know. But what we do know is humbling. Earth's memory is vast. It forgets slowly. Beneath every layer of ice lies a story. And every time we drill, every radar ping we send, we are listening to the planet dream. Maybe one day the ice will melt again, revealing what's been hidden for eons. But until then, the Antarctic night remains unbroken, cold, endless, and full of secrets. Beneath 2 miles of Antarctic ice lies a secret that could rewrite human history. And maybe it's not done writing yet. In the spring of 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri ibn Haji Mehmed, known to history as Piri Reis, unrolled a piece of gazelle skin across his cabin table. Outside,
This cluster
the
here
waves
shows
of the
significant energy
Mediterranean
readings.
The resonance
whispered
data
against
confirms
the
the
hull
void's
of
structural
his ship.
integrity.
How deep do they
Inside,
extend?
by the dim light of an oil lamp, he began to draw the world. With careful hands, he traced coastlines, islands, and seas using crimson and black ink. His work, meant to be a simple navigational aid, would centuries later become one of the greatest enigmas in
The patterns
cartographic
emerge
history.
from the cold,
For on the
ancient
lower edge
light.
of his parchment, Piri Reis drew something that should not have been there. A detailed coastline unmistakably resembling the continent of Antarctica, 300 years before it was officially discovered. Historians have confirmed that Piri Reis compiled his chart from at least 20 older sources, some Arabic, some Portuguese, and others whose origins remain unknown. In a note written on the map itself, he confessed that part of his material came from the maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great. Some scholars believe this phrase may refer to the legendary Library of Alexandria, where ancient knowledge of geography, astronomy, and navigation once flourished before being lost to fire and empire. The more the map was studied, the stranger it became. Its portrayal of the South American coastline was astonishingly accurate, matching modern radar and satellite data with only minimal distortion. Even more bewildering was the southmost section, the portion identified as Antarctica, showing not the frozen wasteland we know today, but a temperate land with mountains, valleys, and flowing rivers. The precision of its latitude and longitudinal alignment suggested a level of measurement impossible without modern instruments. When the map resurfaced in 1929, rolled up in the Topkapi Palace archives, it stunned historians. It seemed to whisper of forgotten voyages, of sailors who had once circled the globe, long before Magellan's fleet ever sailed. But the deeper question lingered in the silence of the scholars' halls. If Piri Reis had only copied what earlier cartographers already knew, then who were those cartographers? By 1953, the mystery had crossed into the realm of science. U.S. Air Force cartographers examined the Piri Reis map and found that the outline of its southern continent matched the subglacial topography of Antarctica, features only confirmed centuries later through seismic and radar surveys. The ice, they knew, had covered that coastline for at least 6,000 years, which meant if the map truly represented Antarctica without ice, its original source had to date from a time when the continent was still free of its frozen crown. This realization sent ripples through both academia and imagination. Some dismissed it as coincidence, others as projection error. Yet there were voices, among them writer and researcher Graham Hancock, who suggested something far older at play. Perhaps, they argued, remnants of an ancient seafaring civilization had once charted the planet, preserving fragments of their knowledge in maps that survived the flood and resurfaced centuries later in the hands of men like Piri Reis. Tonight, as you drift through the quiet of this thought, imagine that scene. An Ottoman admiral bent over his parchment, guided not only by compasses and stars, but by echoes of a civilization long turned to dust. Outside, the sea murmurs. Inside, the ink dries, and a line appears, curving gently along a southern coast no man was yet supposed to know existed. After the rediscovery of Piri Reis's mysterious chart, historians began to search for patterns, traces of similar knowledge hidden in other maps from the age of exploration. What they found was not one isolated anomaly, but a chain of cartographic echoes stretching across 2 centuries. Each seemed to remember something humanity was supposed to have forgotten. In 1531, just 18 years after Piri Reis had finished his work, a French mathematician named Orontius Phineas produced a map that once again depicted Antarctica, but not as an empty sheet of ice. Phineas's version showed rivers winding inland, mountain ranges running east to west, and coastal plains untouched by glaciers. It even placed the continent in near-perfect latitude and longitude alignment with modern measurements. The rivers he drew matched drainage basins later revealed by radar imaging, as though he had somehow traced them through the ice. The pattern deepened with time. In 1569, the Flemish cartographer Gerardus Mercator, whose world map became the foundation of modern navigation, produced another astonishing image. His global projection, famous for its accuracy, included hints of the same southern continent, complete with internal mountain ranges that would not be mapped by science until the 20th century. Mercator was celebrated for his mathematics, but even he could not have guessed what lay 2 miles beneath the ice of Antarctica, unless perhaps he too had access to sources far older than history remembers. Then in 1737 came the Boche map, drawn by French geographer Philippe Boche. This map depicted Antarctica not as a single landmass, but as 2 large islands separated by a narrow sea channel. An impossible detail, unknown until 1949, when seismic surveys beneath the ice confirmed the exact same feature. How could Boche have known? His map, based on ancient sources, as he himself noted, was centuries ahead of its time. It portrayed a subglacial geography invisible even to the most daring explorers of his era. The coincidences piled up like layers of ice. Taken together, these maps formed a strange continuity, a cartographic memory passed from hand to hand across generations, surviving wars, empires, and the slow forgetting of civilizations. The coastlines they shared were too precise to be imagination, yet too ancient to fit within recorded history. In 1949, when seismic surveys conducted by international teams confirmed that the true coastline of Antarctica lay beneath thousands of feet of frozen mass and matched these ancient drawings, skeptics could no longer dismiss them entirely. Something or someone had known the shape of the world long before telescopes, satellites, or sonar ever existed. The scientific community tried to make sense of it. Some argued that the cartographers had mistakenly merged fragments of South America with speculative coastlines, creating an illusion of accuracy. Others pointed out that the mapmakers had access to global currents, star positions, and wind patterns that allowed surprisingly advanced navigation, even with primitive tools. Yet the deeper question remained unsatisfied. If such data required aerial or global perspective, how had it been gathered in the first place? For researchers like Graham Hancock, the answer lay not in coincidence, but in continuity. He proposed that remnants of an advanced Ice Age civilization, seafarers, astronomers, builders, had survived cataclysmic floods around 12,000 years ago and passed fragments of their world maps to later cultures. These fragments, copied and recopied, eventually surfaced in the hands of Renaissance cartographers who did not understand the ancient precision they were preserving. Imagine for a moment that these maps were not inventions, but memories, memories of a warmer world, when Antarctica was green, and human eyes had seen its rivers glint beneath a gentler sun. Perhaps those who once walked its shores recorded what they saw, leaving behind maps like messages in bottles, drifting through time until someone, centuries later, found them again. And so the mystery deepened. The more we learned, the less we understood. Maps that should not have existed continued to speak, quietly but persistently, as though the earth itself had left us a trail of breadcrumbs back to a forgotten chapter of our own story. By the mid-20th century, Antarctica had become a frontier of science, a place where nations, rather than conquer, came to measure, drill, and listen. Beneath the crushing silence of ice, researchers sought to separate myth from data, legend from geology. What they found did not erase the mystery, it only deepened it. In 1949, as part of the British, Norwegian, Swedish Antarctic expedition, seismic teams began to chart the subglacial landscape. They sent sound waves through miles of ice, waiting for echoes to return from the bedrock below. What those echoes revealed stunned them. Beneath the ice sheet lay mountain ranges, valleys, and coastlines nearly identical to the ones drawn on the ancient Gouache and Piri Reis maps. The fit was not perfect, but close enough to ignite new debate. How could maps from the 16th and 17th centuries have captured contours that modern technology was only now confirming? As the data accumulated, one truth became clear. Antarctica was not one solid block of land, but two major masses divided by a narrow buried sea channel. This matched Gouache's 18th century claim exactly, a claim made more than 200 years before seismic science existed. Some geologists dismissed it as coincidence, yet the correspondence was uncanny. When satellite imaging and radar mapping finally confirmed the same feature decades later, the coincidence grew uncomfortably large. Scientists turned to Earth's memory for clues. They drilled deeper, extracting ice cores that told stories older than civilization itself. Each layer recorded a season, a breath, a heartbeat of the planet. Within these cores, geochemists found evidence of warm periods, of forests and flowing rivers where now there was only eternal frost. Antarctica, it seemed, had not always been frozen. But the question remained, when had it changed? And who had known its shape before the snow came? Some pointed to plate tectonics and polar drift, the slow migration of continents across the globe. Over millions of years, Antarctica had indeed moved from tropical to polar latitudes. But that alone could not explain the accuracy of the ancient coastlines. Others speculated that these maps were the result of prehistoric global surveys conducted when the ice sheets were thinner, perhaps by cultures now lost to flood or fire. To mainstream science, these claims bordered on fantasy. Yet to thinkers like Graham Hancock, fantasy and forgotten truth were sometimes the same thing seen through different eyes. In his writings, Hancock suggested that ancient civilizations, perhaps survivors of an Ice Age cataclysm, might have passed fragments of advanced knowledge through time, the geometry of the Earth, the mapping of stars, the contours of continents. When the floodwaters came, these fragments became relics, echoes preserved in myths and maps. Later generations, unaware of their origin, copied them faithfully, mistaking relics for imagination. Modern research offers its own quiet possibilities. Some geologists now believe that parts of the Antarctic coastline may have been ice-free as recently as 6,000 to 12,000 years ago. Precisely the window when human myths across the world began to speak of floods, extinctions, and lost lands. In that light, the Piri-Reis map becomes not a contradiction, but a whisper, a half-remembered echo of a time when the poles had not yet sealed their secrets. And so the mystery lives on. Every new discovery beneath the ice brings us closer to the truth, and yet somehow farther from certainty. The continent itself remains silent, holding its secrets under 2 miles of frozen time. Scientists measure, historians debate, dreamers listen. Perhaps the answer lies not in proving who drew the maps, but in remembering why we keep drawing them. To map the world is to know it, to make the unknown visible, even for a moment. And maybe that impulse, as old as firelight and story, is what connects us still to those ancient map makers, whoever they were. Outside, the Antarctic night deepens. The stars glint above the endless white, cold and bright, reflecting on a continent that has seen the rise and fall of ages. Beneath that silent ice, the earth dreams, and in those dreams, lines are drawn. Curves of forgotten shores, inked in memory, waiting to be rediscovered.
The year was 1946. The world was still catching its breath after the Second World War. Cities rebuilding, nations exhausted, and yet, in the farthest corner of the Earth, another operation was quietly being prepared. It was called Operation High Jump. On paper, it was a scientific expedition organized by the United States Navy. In reality, it would become one of the most secretive, controversial, and mysterious missions of the 20th century. Led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a man already famous for his polar explorations, Operation High Jump assembled an extraordinary force, 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. For a mission described as research, it looked more like an invasion fleet. The official goal was to establish a research base in Antarctica, test equipment in extreme cold, and train personnel for future missions. But from the moment the fleet departed Norfolk, Virginia in August 1946, rumors began to swirl. Why would a peaceful scientific mission require destroyers, aircraft carriers, and submarine escorts? For those who knew Admiral Byrd, there was something unsettling in his determination. He was a man of science, yes, but also a man who believed Antarctica held more than snow and silence. During earlier flights, he had reported vast mountain ranges, strange warm air currents, and regions that defied the expected temperatures of the polar world. He had even hinted in earlier speeches that the Earth still had lands unexplored beyond the poles. Few understood what he meant. As the Armada entered the icy seas of the Southern Ocean, the operation moved swiftly. Massive aircraft launched from the deck of the USS Philippine Sea, flying reconnaissance over thousands of square miles. They photographed glaciers, mapped coastlines, and identified potential sites for research bases. On the surface, it all seemed routine, the next logical step in post-war exploration. But behind the official reports, strange notes began to appear in private logs. Aircraft were reported lost under unclear circumstances. Communications were disrupted. Some crew members spoke of lights in the sky, of magnetic interference, of equipment malfunctioning without reason. After just 2 months, the mission abruptly ended, 6 months ahead of schedule. The fleet returned home battered, weary, and silent. The official explanation was extreme weather conditions, yet the Antarctic summer that year had been unusually mild. No one could explain why a mission so vast, so expensive, had been cut short so suddenly. When Admiral Byrd returned, his statements only fueled more speculation. In a 1947 interview with El Mercurio, a Chilean newspaper, he spoke cryptically of a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole faster than thought itself. His words were dismissed as metaphor or misquotation, but for many, it sounded like a warning. Within months, his reports and personal diaries were classified. What exactly had Operation High Jump encountered on the ice? In the years that followed, whispers of lost aircraft, unknown craft, and encounters with phenomena beyond explanation spread quietly among researchers and veterans. Some claimed the U.S. Navy had discovered remnants of ancient structures buried in the ice, metallic anomalies detected by sonar and magnetometers. Others believed the operation had stumbled upon something far stranger, evidence of a power or presence that did not belong to the modern world. Of course, historians maintain a more grounded view. They say the expedition was purely logistical, that technical failures and frostbite, not secrets, ended the mission early. Yet the silence in the official archives, the sealed photographs, and the classified pages tell a different story, one that feels less like science and more like myth, waiting to be rediscovered. So tonight, as you listen, imagine the scene, an entire naval fleet drifting through icebergs the size of cities. The engines hum under an endless sky of aurora light. Somewhere within that frozen maze, a pilot radios a final message, and the transmission cuts to static. The ice closes in again, as if the continent itself has swallowed another secret.
When Admiral Richard E. Byrd returned from Antarctica in early 1947, he was no longer the same man who had left. His face carried the calm of discipline, but his eyes held something else, the look of someone who had seen too much, or perhaps too far. Publicly, he gave interviews about science and logistics. Privately, his words hinted at something extraordinary. Among his personal papers, now the subject of endless speculation, lies what is often called Byrd's secret diary. Though its authenticity remains debated, the entries it contains are unlike any other records in exploration history. They describe an event during one of his flights over the polar region, a moment when the compass spun wildly and the landscape below began to change. Byrd wrote of green valleys, rivers glinting in the sunlight, and mountains rising from the mist, an impossible sight in a land of ice. He called it the land beyond the pole. In the diary, he noted, "I have seen a region that should not exist. Beyond the ice barrier lies a vast, lush area, bathed in light that does not come from the sun." His words seem poetic, perhaps delusional. Yet those who have flown over Antarctica know how the mind can play tricks in the endless white. Still, some details in the diary resist easy dismissal. Byrd described warm air currents, magnetic anomalies, and an area where his instruments ceased to function altogether. What was this land beyond the pole? Mainstream historians argue that the diary is a fabrication, a later invention built from fragments of Byrd's writings and post-war myth-making. But even so, his public statements are verifiable. In 1947, speaking to reporters in Chile, he warned of a potential threat that could come from the polar regions, flying objects capable of crossing from pole to pole at incredible speeds. This was 2 years before the term UFO had even entered popular vocabulary. The statement was quietly buried, and Byrd himself retreated from public attention soon after. Meanwhile, Operation High Jump remained cloaked in silence. The official reports released by the Navy were sanitized, stripped of any unusual observations. Yet testimony from several officers hinted at unexpected resistance. Aircraft encountering blinding lights and sudden electrical failures, and a few even spoke of seeing objects rising vertically from the sea. These accounts were never confirmed, but they refused to disappear. For decades, the story lingered at the edge of possibility, part documented history, part whispered legend. To some, it was evidence that Byrd had stumbled upon a hidden region beneath the ice, perhaps containing ancient ruins or even a self-sustaining ecosystem sealed away for millennia. To others, it symbolized something psychological. The explorers' longing for discovery turned inward, imagining a paradise where there was none. But the phrase, "land beyond the pole," has never lost its power. It reappears in literature, in conspiracy theories, and in whispers of hollow earth tales. Ideas that the Earth might hold internal realms, accessible through the poles, inhabited by forgotten beings or remnants of earlier civilizations. While science rejects such notions, the persistence of the myth speaks to a deeper curiosity that perhaps not all Earth's mysteries lie above the surface. Even within modern research, Antarctica continues to surprise. Satellite imagery has revealed vast underground lakes, networks of subglacial rivers, and magnetic anomalies deep beneath the ice cap, all invisible to the human eye. To some, these discoveries echo Byrd's words too perfectly to ignore. Imagine him now, alone in his cockpit, high above the polar expanse. The horizon curves away into eternity. The compass spins uselessly. Below, something vast and green flickers through the mist. A mirage, perhaps, or a memory of what the world once was. His voice crackles over the radio. "We are crossing into an unknown country." Then the transmission fades into static, and the silence returns, heavy, eternal, and full of unanswered questions.
When the last ships of Operation High Jump returned to American shores in early 1947, the world heard little of what had truly transpired. The official statement was brief: mission completed. Yet it had ended 6 months early, with aircraft lost, several men dead, and equipment mysteriously damaged. No public inquiry followed. No press conferences were held. The Antarctic fleet dispersed into silence as if it had never existed. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the hero of the poles, faded quietly from headlines. Those who interviewed him in South America reported odd fragments of conversation, remarks about a new threat from the polar regions and aircraft that could fly from one pole to another in moments. Some dismissed these words as fatigue or metaphor, but for others, they marked the birth of something far stranger, the first modern Antarctic conspiracy. The United States government, now entering the tense dawn of the Cold War, immediately classified much of the operation's data. A few photographs were released, snowfields, ships, smiling sailors, but the most crucial radar and reconnaissance records disappeared into military archives. Scientists who had been part of the expedition were reassigned. Research findings were under review, and so Antarctica returned to its role as a blank space on the map, beautiful, distant, and untouchable. For a time, the world forgot. Then, in 1956, the Navy launched Operation Deep Freeze, another Antarctic mission, again under Byrd's name. He was older now, weakened by years of exploration, yet his fascination remained undimmed. But even as new bases were built and new data gathered, the mysteries of high jump continued to haunt the imagination. What had forced an entire fleet to retreat from a mission so well equipped? Why were so many details still missing? Some researchers proposed simple explanations: mechanical failure, navigational confusion, and the deadly unpredictability of Antarctic weather. Yet others pointed out the odd timing, the secrecy, the sudden withdrawals, the classified reports. And then there was the question of what Byrd had seen, or believed he had seen, beyond the pole. As the 1950s gave way to the space age, the mystery of Operation High Jump evolved into legend. Books and documentaries speculated that the expedition had discovered ancient ruins, perhaps remnants of a pre-Ice Age civilization buried beneath the ice. Others whispered of encounters with technology that defied logic. Craft moving faster than any known aircraft, vanishing as suddenly as they appeared. To the rational mind, these stories are impossible. Yet the strange power of the Antarctic lies precisely there, in its silence, its refusal to confirm or deny. The continent keeps its secrets, not through walls or weapons, but through the sheer immensity of its isolation. Every discovery there raises more questions than it answers. In the decades since, scientists have uncovered underground lakes, magnetic anomalies, and unusual heat signatures deep beneath the ice, some so strong they cannot be explained by geology alone. To some, these are echoes of high jump. To others, they are reminders that our planet still hides corners we do not yet understand. Perhaps the true meaning of Operation High Jump was never about war or discovery. Perhaps it was about humility. The moment humanity stood at the edge of the known world and realized that knowledge has boundaries, that beyond the pole, as Byrd once said, lies not another land, but another truth, one that sleeps beneath the ice, waiting for an age when we are ready to understand it. Tonight, as the story drifts to its quiet close, Imagine those ships sailing home under gray southern skies. The men aboard say nothing. The ocean is calm, the horizon empty. Behind them, the white continent fades into mist, as silent as it has always been. Somewhere beneath that endless snow, the earth still dreams, and in that dream, the echoes of Operation High Jump continue, whispering softly across time.
It began not with explorers or airplanes, but with a click, a zoom, a pause, a silent gasp. In 2016, users of Google Earth began to notice strange shapes emerging from the endless whiteness of Antarctica. At first, they seemed like tricks of light, optical illusions formed by shadows and snowdrifts. But as more people looked, the patterns became impossible to ignore. At coordinates 75 degrees 00 minutes 46.98 seconds south, 0 degrees 04 minutes 52.71 seconds east, a formation appeared, a near-perfect pyramid rising from the ice. Its sides were symmetrical, its angles precise, and its scale staggering. Nearly 400 meters at the base and 300 meters high. The slopes formed a consistent 45 degrees, identical to the geometry of the Great Pyramid of Giza. For something buried in one of the most remote and inhospitable regions on Earth, it was unnervingly perfect. Satellite analysts dismissed it as a natural nunatak, a mountain peak protruding through glacial ice. But as images were enhanced, the clarity deepened rather than blurred. The symmetry was too deliberate, too aligned with cardinal directions. And then another discovery followed. Roughly 2,000 kilometers east, at coordinates 66 degrees 36 minutes 12.58 seconds south, 99 degrees 43 minutes 12.72 seconds east, a razor-straight line cut across the landscape for more than 150 kilometers. No natural process on Earth, not tectonics, not glaciation, creates such linear precision at that scale. It was as though something massive, buried long ago, had been revealed by the slow, shifting movements of the ice. And then came the third, a perfect circle, 400 meters across, located at 69 degrees 53 minutes 42.03 seconds south, 38 degrees 42 minutes 22 seconds east. From above, it looked like the foundation of a dome or a crater, but the smoothness of its curvature and the sharpness of its edges suggested design, not destruction. 3 anomalies, 3 points, and when connected, they formed a triangle, one whose vertices aligned eerily with ancient geometric ratios. By 2020, the fascination had spread beyond amateur researchers. Teams of geologists and remote sensing experts began cross-referencing satellite imagery with radar data from NASA's Ice Bridge mission, a program designed to map the three-dimensional structure beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. What they found was breathtaking. Icebridge revealed vast canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon itself, hidden rivers carved in ancient stone, and networks of subglacial lakes stretching for hundreds of miles. Beneath the surface, the continent was anything but lifeless. It pulsed with movement, ice flowing like water, mountains breathing under pressure, and heat rising from volcanic chambers below. But the pyramid structures, as the public had named them, continued to defy explanation. When radar mapping was focused on the coordinates of the main formation, the results were inconclusive. The subsurface reflected strangely, as if composed of layered material rather than solid rock. Some readings suggested hollows within. Others showed reflections that matched crystalline patterns, structures perhaps of ice and mineral, but also eerily consistent with human construction. To scientists, it became a case study in perception, how easily the mind finds order in chaos. To others, it was evidence of something buried before history began, relics of a civilization erased by time and frost. The debate quietly divided the community. Could a civilization have existed in Antarctica when it was warm 12,000 years ago? Could these be their monuments, now sealed beneath the ice? Or were these shapes simply the planet's way of reminding us that nature too can sculpt wonders undistinguishable from art? As satellites continued their silent watch from orbit, the ice remained unbroken. The pyramids, or mountains, stood still beneath the aurora, gleaming faintly under the eternal twilight. Whether nature or memory carved them, they had already fulfilled their purpose: to make humanity look again, more closely, into the frozen mirror of its own forgotten past.
It started as a curiosity, a strange straight line stretching across Antarctica's frozen surface. But as satellite images grew sharper, what had seemed like a simple geological feature began to look unsettlingly deliberate. At coordinates 66 degrees, 36 minutes, 12.58 seconds south, 99 degrees, 43 minutes, 12.72 seconds east, the ice was marked by a narrow ridge, long, uniform, and unnaturally straight. For nearly 150 kilometers, it extended in a perfect path, cutting through hills, valleys, and glaciers without deviation.
Geologists first thought it might be a crevasse line, a crack formed by stress within the ice sheet. But crevasses wander, twist, and fracture. This one did not. It ran true, as if drawn by an invisible ruler. And its orientation, when mapped, pointed precisely toward the supposed pyramid formations discovered years earlier. Coincidence? Perhaps. But when NASA's Ice Bridge mission passed over the region, the radar told a different story. Ice-penetrating radar revealed a subsurface formation running parallel to the surface line, a structure buried hundreds of meters below. The reflection profile was unusual, alternating dense and hollow layers, resembling the remains of a collapsed tunnel or corridor. The feature stretched beneath the ice like a vein of forgotten architecture, its angles far too consistent for random geology. Around this time, whispers began circulating among researchers, quiet speculation that Antarctica might hide more than just geology. Could these lines represent remnants of ancient fault systems? Or were they, as some dared to suggest, corridors, part of a grid connecting deeper subterranean features across the continent? In 2022, when the European Space Agency released new interferometric radar data, the anomaly returned stronger than ever. The radar revealed repeating geometric signals, patterns recurring every few kilometers, parallel formations forming angles of 90 and 45 degrees. For natural formations, such consistency is exceedingly rare. For engineered structures, it is expected. Meanwhile, beneath the surface, NASA's Ice Bridge continued mapping in 3 dimensions. The mission's instruments discovered something astonishing: a canyon system running deeper than the Grand Canyon itself, hidden entirely under ice. Some scientists speculated that this canyon might once have served as a vast waterway, carrying meltwater from a warm Antarctica to the surrounding oceans. Others wondered whether its formation aligned too neatly with the straight-line anomalies seen from above. If the canyon was natural, why did its edges reflect radar signals like smooth walls? And why did its intersections form near-perfect geometric nodes? Each new discovery blurred the line between nature and design. By 2025, Antarctica had become the ultimate paradox. The deeper our technology reached, the less we understood. Beneath miles of compressed ice, the continent seemed to whisper of lost motion, of rivers that once flowed, or roads that once led somewhere. Historians of science drew parallels to ancient architecture. They spoke of the Nazca lines in Peru, carved into desert plains, massive figures visible only from the sky. Could Antarctica hold its own version, carved not by hands but by forces equally mysterious? Perhaps, as some proposed, these lines were the last scars of an earlier civilization, a blueprint preserved by accident, the skeletal remains of a world that melted long before our own. Or perhaps they were simply the artistry of nature itself, painting geometry into chaos, reminding us that beauty and mystery need not belong to human design. From orbit, the satellites continued their quiet vigil. Each pass added another layer of data, another fragment of an unsolved riddle. In the endless cold, the lines still stretched unbroken, gleaming faintly through the ice like a frozen pulse, a heartbeat of a story still untold. As the satellites continued their silent watch, another revelation began to emerge, one that changed how scientists viewed the frozen continent. Underneath Antarctica's miles of ice, radar from NASA's Ice Bridge and the European Cryosat missions began revealing something extraordinary. A hidden network, an interconnected web of features that seemed to pulse beneath the cold like veins beneath translucent skin. The data told a strange story. Deep beneath the surface, dozens of subglacial lakes shimmered, not isolated pools, but part of a vast system stretching for hundreds of miles. They were connected by tunnels and channels where liquid water still flowed in the darkness, defying the freezing cold through pressure and geothermal warmth. The largest of these, Lake Vostok, was larger than Lake Ontario, sealed off from sunlight for perhaps 1 million years. Yet within its black waters, microbial life endured. But beyond these natural marvels, something else began to stand out. Between several of the radar-identified lakes, faint linear echoes appeared, lines too straight, too evenly spaced to be dismissed as coincidence. The geometry hinted at order. When the data were plotted in 3 dimensions, the lines and curves formed a lattice, as if outlining a structure buried far below. The formations appeared in clusters, pyramidal rises, circular depressions, and rectangular voids, all aligned along invisible axes that followed neither geological fault lines nor glacial flow. Geophysicists hesitated to speculate. They spoke carefully, choosing words like subsurface anomalies, patterned formations, stratigraphic echoes. But outside academic circles, the imagination of the world ignited. Was it possible, people wondered, that these were the remnants of something older than ice? Perhaps the bones of a civilization swallowed by cataclysm. The idea was not without precedent. In every corner of human myth, there exists a memory of a flood, a collapse, a forgotten world erased by time. If Antarctica had once been green, its mountains kissed by sunlight, and its valleys filled with life, might its people, whoever they were, have built monuments now hidden beneath the snow? Could the pyramids, the straight lines, and the perfect circles be their signatures, now preserved in ice as fossils of geometry? NASA's Ice Bridge scientists continued to refine their scans. In 2024, one data set revealed a canyon so vast it dwarfed the Grand Canyon, stretching nearly 1,000 kilometers long and deeper than any known valley on Earth. Within its depths, radar detected repeating resonance, echoes bouncing in rhythmic patterns that could only mean hollow space. Whether these voids were natural caverns or something else, no one could yet say. At the same time, magnetic anomaly maps showed regions of intense distortion, zones where compasses would fail and instruments spin erratically. Some researchers speculated about iron-rich meteorites buried in the crust. Others quietly wondered if the distortions marked something artificial, ancient metal perhaps, resting under millions of tons of pressure. Every new discovery deepened the riddle. For every rational explanation, there remained one detail that didn't quite fit: an angle too precise, a distance too perfect, a reflection too strong. It was as if the continent itself resisted being fully understood. And so the story of Antarctica, once thought to be a barren world of snow, became a mirror of our own curiosity. Satellites mapped it, scientists measured it, yet the mystery only grew richer. Was it possible that in seeking the origins of these anomalies, humanity was, in truth, searching for its own lost reflection, a reminder that civilizations rise, fall, and vanish, leaving behind only patterns that whisper through the ages? As the aurora flickers across the polar night, the instruments fall silent. The ice does not answer, but beneath 2 miles of frozen time, something ancient still breathes, quiet, patient, enduring, and the satellites above continue their endless orbit, tracing invisible paths through the sky like the watchful eyes of gods who long ago might have built the very things we now rediscover.
15,000 years ago, Antarctica was not the white desert we know today. It was a living world, a temperate land with mosses, rivers, and perhaps even forests swaying in the southern breeze. For centuries, this idea sounded like fantasy, but beneath the ice, evidence waited, silent, frozen, and patient. The story begins with a drill. In 2004, the European project for ice coring in Antarctica, EPICA, completed one of the deepest ice cores ever extracted, a shaft reaching 3,270 meters down into ancient ice. Each layer, thin as a page, recorded a single year of Earth's memory. Trapped inside were bubbles of air older than civilization itself, frozen whispers of the world's forgotten seasons. When scientists analyzed the samples, they uncovered a timeline stretching back 800,000 years. Temperature shifts, dust storms, changes in greenhouse gases. The ice was a diary written not in ink, but in oxygen and carbon. And between those frozen chapters, a revelation appeared. Around 17,000 BC, the data showed a sudden warmth. Temperatures rose from below zero to nearly mild, between -5 degrees Celsius and 0 degrees Celsius. Moss and lichen could have clung to rocky ground, and patches of dark soil may have dotted the landscape. By 15,000 BC, that warmth had deepened. The average temperature climbed another 10 degrees. For the first time in millennia, Antarctica could breathe. What followed was extraordinary. Within the layers corresponding to this era, scientists discovered microscopic pollen grains, proof that vegetation had flourished. These weren't just traces of moss or algae. They belonged to trees. Glostoperus, a fern-like plant that required a temperate climate.
Nothophagus, the southern beech, thriving at 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, and Podocarpus, a subtropical conifer still found in New Zealand and Chile today. The presence of these pollens was like a whisper from an impossible past. Antarctica, once green. Between 15,000 and 13,000 BC, the continent reached its peak warmth. Ice melted, rivers formed, and the air temperature rivaled modern-day Wellington or southern Patagonia. If any form of civilization had existed then, human or otherwise, this would have been their golden age. The conditions were perfect: a mild climate, access to the ocean, abundant fresh water. But the story takes a turn. Around 12,800 BC, the ice cores show a dramatic collapse. Within a century, temperatures plunged nearly 20 degrees. The CO2 levels dropped, and traces of cosmic dust spiked in the ice, a signal scientists now recognize as the signature of a catastrophic event. The Younger Dryas impact. Somewhere in the northern hemisphere, perhaps over Greenland, a comet or asteroid 5 kilometers wide struck the planet with unimaginable force. The explosion sent shockwaves around the world, igniting wildfires and shrouding the skies in ash. Within 100 years, a blink in geological time, Antarctica froze again. The lush valleys vanished beneath storms of snow. By 11,600 BC, the temperature had fallen below -30 degrees Celsius. Forests turned to fossil, rivers to glass. What life remained fled north or perished in silence. The EPICA Ice Cores captured it all: the rise, the bloom, the fall, like a planet inhaling and exhaling across millennia. To read those layers is to watch a world die in slow motion. Yet within that tragedy lies a strange beauty. For in every trapped bubble of air, we find not just evidence of change, but of resilience. A reminder that Earth is a living system, capable of rebirth after even the coldest night. And so, the myth of a green Antarctica was no longer myth. It became data, fragile, irrefutable, and quietly astonishing. The continent we call frozen was once alive. Its story, written in ice, now whispers to those who listen. Before the frost, there was rain. Before the silence, there was song.
If the ice cores revealed the story of air, then fossils revealed the story of life. Buried in stone, sealed beneath glaciers, and sleeping through ages of cold, the remains of an ancient forest still whisper from Antarctica's heart. In 1986, at the Trans-Antarctic Mountains, scientists unearthed something no one expected to find so close to the South Pole: the bones of a dinosaur. It was named Cryolophosaurus ellioti, a 6-meter-tall predator that roamed these lands 190 million years ago. Its discovery shattered the myth of eternal ice. The layers that held its skeleton were once soil, warm, wet, and alive. This was not the Antarctica of snowstorms, but a tropical continent where giant ferns swayed and rivers sparkled under a humid sky.
5 years later, another discovery deepened the mystery. In 1991, geologists working near Beardmore Glacier uncovered the remains of a fossilized forest. The wood, petrified into stone, was still standing upright. Trees between 12 and 15 meters tall, their trunks preserved with eerie perfection. The species identified was Glossopteris, a tree fern that once blanketed the supercontinent of Gondwana more than 280 million years ago. To hold a piece of that tree was to touch a world that existed before mammals, before humans, before even the shape of our continents as we know them. But the story didn't end there. In 2016, researchers drilling near Pine Island Glacier found something younger and far more surprising. Beneath layers of ice, they discovered fossilized roots and leaves dating back 90 million years. Evidence of a thriving rainforest that once stretched across the southern coast. The chemical signatures told a clear story. The average temperature was between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. There was no ice then, only dense vegetation, rain, and sunlight filtering through tall canopies. As if nature had hidden away a secret memory of its warmer self. And yet, the most extraordinary discovery came only recently. In 2020, a team working in the Ross Sea extracted sediment cores containing plant spores and root fragments dating back 12,000 to 15,000 years ago, precisely when humans already walked the Earth. These weren't ancient, prehistoric forests of the dinosaurs. These were remnants of a world our ancestors could have known. A world that had not yet frozen. In those layers, scientists found Nothofagus, the southern beech, and Podocarpus, a subtropical pine. The pollen patterns matched those found today in temperate New Zealand. The alignment was undeniable. Antarctica in the late Ice Age was still green. Beardmore Glacier became the holy ground of this revelation, a treasure vault of fossils stretching over 200 kilometers. Thousands of preserved specimens, trunks, roots, leaves, lie entombed in the ice, silent witnesses to a paradise lost. The first to glimpse them was the legendary explorer Ernest Shackleton in 1908. He had no idea what they were, only that they looked impossibly alive for something trapped in stone. Decades later, scientists would confirm it. These were the remnants of a vast forest that once spanned the Antarctic interior, connecting it to the rest of Gondwana. Among the most beautiful finds were fossilized roots of vertebraria, delicately veined like the tendons of an ancient world, and Gangopteris, fern-like leaves with fractal symmetry. These were not just relics of evolution, they were poems written in carbon and time. The Ross Sea drilling project added another chapter. By boring 1,200 meters below the seafloor, researchers recovered sediments dating back 20 million years, containing pollen and wood particles that perfectly matched those found in the 12,000 to 15,000 year window. It was as if the Earth had kept a perfect record, one that aligned with the same period shown in the Piri-Reis map, when the southern continent was drawn without ice. Each fossil, each pollen grain, each ring of ancient wood became a letter in a message written across eons. Antarctica was not always frozen. It had rivers, forests, and a heartbeat. And when we listen closely, through ice, through time, we can almost hear the sound of wind rustling through leaves long turned to stone.
It happened suddenly. The warmth that had cradled life across the southern continent began to fade. The rivers slowed, the forests fell silent, and the skies, once thick with rain and light, grew heavy with ash. Something catastrophic had arrived. Around 12,800 BC, the Earth changed forever. Ice core data from both Greenland and Antarctica tell the same story: a violent temperature drop, a collapse of climate stability, and the birth of an age of ice. For decades, scientists struggled to explain it. Then came a theory, bold, controversial, and hauntingly plausible: the Younger Dryas impact. According to this theory, a comet or asteroid roughly 5 kilometers wide entered the atmosphere and struck the northern ice sheet over Greenland. The collision released energy equal to 1 million Hiroshima bombs. The sky ignited. Shock waves circled the globe, and the force of the impact sent plumes of molten ice and debris high into the stratosphere. Within days, sunlight dimmed, and global temperatures began to fall. In the Antarctic ice cores, a layer of microscopic glass spherules appeared, the fingerprints of melted rock that had vaporized in an instant. Alongside them were traces of platinum, a metal rare on Earth but common in extraterrestrial objects. Even more chilling was the layer of soot, a black horizon separating the warmth that came before from the eternal cold that followed. It was the scar of a planetary wound. The Younger Dryas event triggered chaos across both hemispheres. Oceans cooled, monsoons vanished, and the global food web collapsed. In the north, mammoths and giant sloths disappeared. In the south, Antarctica, once temperate, began to die. Within a few centuries, temperatures there plummeted by more than 20 degrees. The lush forests of Nothofagus and Podocarpus withered beneath snowfall that never melted. The rivers froze, trapping their motion forever beneath the first thin crust of ice that would, over millennia, grow into miles of glacial glass. By 11,600 BC, the transformation was complete. The paradise that had flourished for thousands of years lay buried under 2 miles of ice. What had been soil became permafrost. What had been forest became fossil, and the hum of life gave way to a silence so deep it seemed to echo. In Greenland, a crater was discovered beneath the Hiawatha Glacier, 31 kilometers wide,
perfectly circular and younger than 13,000 years. Many believe it to be the impact site. Its discovery, like a puzzle piece emerging from snow, gave form to the unthinkable. If true, it meant the very force that froze the North had also sealed Antarctica's fate. And yet there is a strange beauty in that tragedy. For in freezing, Antarctica became a time capsule, a continent locked away to preserve the memory of its green past. Beneath 2 miles of silence, seeds still sleep. Fossilized roots still grip the earth as if waiting for spring. And the ice, in its endless patience, carries every whisper of the world that came before. The younger Dryas did not destroy life, it transformed it. It reminded the planet of impermanence, that warmth and cold, life and death, creation and destruction are not opposites, but mirrors. One gives meaning to the other. When we read the ice cores today, we are not just studying temperature and dust. We are listening to a requiem, the quiet song of a world that once was. A world where Antarctica was green, and the Earth was alive in ways we can barely imagine. And perhaps, as the planet warms again in our age, that ancient story is returning, not as prophecy, but as memory. The same warmth that once gave birth to forests beneath the South Pole now rises again, melting the past back into the present. The Earth remembers, the ice keeps its secrets, and somewhere, beneath the endless white, the roots of a forgotten forest still dream of sunlight.
Imagine this. Beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, sealed away from sunlight for 15 million years, there lies a vast body of water, a hidden ocean the size of Lake Ontario. Its name is Lake Vostok, and it may hold some of the oldest secrets on Earth. The story of its discovery began not with explorers, but with sound waves. In the 1960s, a Russian geophysicist named Andrei Kapitsa proposed that beneath the icy plateau near the Soviet research base, Vostok Station, there could be a liquid lake trapped under extreme pressure. His theory was met with curiosity and doubt. How could water remain liquid under so much ice? But Kapitsa's intuition was right. In 1974, radar surveys first detected something unusual, an immense, flat surface reflecting signals in a way ice never does. It was smooth, consistent, almost mirror-like. 2 decades later, in 1993, satellite altimetry confirmed it. Beneath 3,700 meters of Antarctic ice lay an enormous body of water, 250 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide. Scientists named it Lake Vostok. Further studies revealed astonishing details. The lake contained 5,400 cubic kilometers of water, enough to make it the 6th largest lake in the world. Despite temperatures of -3 degrees Celsius, the water remained unfrozen, kept liquid by crushing pressure, 350 times greater than what we experience at sea level. And beneath that pressure, the bottom of the lake glowed with unexpected warmth, geothermal heat rising from the Earth's core, keeping the depths alive. But the real mystery was not just its size, it was its temperature. Seismic readings showed zones within the lake where the temperature ranged from +2 degrees Celsius to +10 degrees Celsius, and in some regions even higher, near +18 degrees Celsius. No natural explanation fit perfectly. The geothermal heat was too localized, the temperature too high. Something beneath the ice was generating energy, but what? In 2012, Russian scientists drilled through the 3.7 kilometers of ice and reached the surface of Lake Vostok for the first time in human history. What came up through the borehole stunned everyone. Water that had not touched the atmosphere in 15 million years. It hissed softly, like air escaping from another era. The team immediately sealed the sample to avoid contamination. When the analysis was done, the data defied expectations. Among the findings were fragments of DNA, strands that belonged to no known organism on Earth. 94% of the genetic material retrieved from the sample could not be matched to any species in existing databases. Some scientists believed it was simply bacterial contamination. Others were not so sure. Could these be the descendants of life that evolved in total isolation beneath the ice in an alien darkness? Lake Vostok is not just a lake, it is a world within a world. A complete ecosystem, self-contained and untouched since before humans existed. Its depths are pitch black, its pressure immense, and its oxygen levels 50 times higher than the oceans above. To live there would require life to adapt beyond imagination. Microbial colonies thriving on chemical reactions instead of sunlight, perhaps forming biofilms on the rocky bottom or clinging to thermal vents that pulse faint warmth into the eternal dark. To peer into Lake Vostok is to glimpse a mirror of other worlds, Europa, the icy moon of Jupiter, or Enceladus, circling Saturn, where liquid oceans may also hide beneath frozen crusts. The discoveries beneath Antarctica might not just reveal Earth's past, but the future of space exploration itself. And yet the mystery deepens. The magnetic readings around Vostok Station show anomalies, areas where compasses spin and instruments malfunction. Some say these are simply geological features. Others whisper of something far stranger, that beneath this ancient lake lies not only life, but the remnants of something built. The truth remains buried, locked under 4 kilometers of silence. For now, all we can do is listen to the hum of the planet, to the faint pulse beneath the ice, to a lake that has not seen light for 15 million years, and yet still lives.
Lake Vostok, it turned out, was not alone. What began as a single discovery slowly unfolded into a revelation. Beneath Antarctica's frozen shell lies a vast, interconnected hydrological system. Rivers, channels, and more than 400 subglacial lakes, all hidden in the dark. In the decades following the discovery of Lake Vostok, radar and seismic mapping revealed dozens, then hundreds of similar pockets of liquid water beneath the ice. Some were as small as ponds, others vast enough to swallow cities. Together, they formed a secret network stretching across the continent.
a ghostly mirror of the world above. One of the most studied is Lake Ellsworth, located in West Antarctica. It is 10 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide, its waters sealed beneath 3 kilometers of ice. Despite temperatures as low as -15 degrees Celsius, it remains liquid, heated gently by pressure and geothermal warmth. In 2012, British scientists attempted to reach it, hoping to find life, but their drill failed just before contact. Even so, the data gathered confirmed something profound. The ice was alive with microbial activity, perhaps tracing down from unseen ecosystems below. Further east lies Lake Whillans, near the Ross Ice Shelf, a smaller, shallower body, only 60 square kilometers in size. It was here, in 2013, that researchers made one of the most extraordinary discoveries in polar science. When samples were retrieved, they revealed over 3,900 distinct species of bacteria and microorganisms, living, breathing, metabolizing in complete darkness, under pressures that would crush almost any known form of life. These tiny survivors thrived not on sunlight, but on chemical energy drawn from minerals. They performed chemosynthesis, the same process used by life around deep-sea vents. If life could endure under such impossible conditions, what else might be living in the deeper lakes, where no probe has yet reached? Beyond these, radar mapping revealed even larger systems. Lake CECs in Wilkesland, stretching 90 kilometers, showing intense magnetic anomalies, and Lake 90 degrees east, a 2,000 square kilometer body lying near the coordinates of one of Antarctica's mysterious pyramidal formations. In 2023, high-resolution gravity surveys detected density fluctuations around this region, suggesting cavities, chambers, or structures. Yet perhaps most astonishing of all is the discovery of a subglacial river system, one that flows beneath the ice like a hidden artery. Originating near Dome A, the highest point of the Antarctic plateau, it travels more than 1,500 kilometers beneath the Recovery Glacier before emptying into the Filchner ice shelf. Moving slowly, just 10 to 50 meters per year, it connects 15 to 20 subglacial lakes, including Vostok itself. Scientists now believe this river system acts as a vast circulatory network, maintaining pressure balance and nutrient exchange throughout the hidden aquatic world. The implications are staggering. Beneath 2 miles of ice, Antarctica is not static, but alive. A continent of motion, water, and perhaps even biology. And then there is Wilkesland. At 70 degrees south, 120 degrees east, instruments began to detect something that defied explanation. A massive gravitational anomaly, 480 kilometers across. The distortion was so intense, it suggested the presence of an object with extraordinary mass buried deep beneath the ice. Some hypothesize it to be the scar of an asteroid impact, dating back 250 million years. Perhaps the very event that ended the Permian era, Earth's greatest extinction. Others whisper of something even stranger, a metallic structure, geometric, deliberate. The truth is hidden beneath kilometers of compressed snow, unreachable by drill or radar. But whatever lies below Wilkes Land radiates a magnetic field so powerful that even passing aircraft instruments flicker. As the radar pulses across the continent, faint echoes return, whispers of water, movement, and warmth, forming a map not of stone but of flow. Beneath the frozen desert, Antarctica keeps its heart beating, slow, secret, eternal. And through that heart runs the same question humanity has asked since it first looked at the stars. If life can thrive here, in darkness and pressure and silence, where else might it be waiting to be found?
As the world's attention turned toward the discoveries beneath Antarctica, Lake Vostok became more than a scientific wonder. It became a riddle, a mirror that reflected both the precision of data and the boundless reach of imagination. Because among all the facts and measurements, there remained something that refused to be explained. The first sign was heat. In certain regions of the lake, sensors recorded temperatures as high as plus 18 degrees Celsius, far above what geothermal activity alone could produce. These hotspots seemed to concentrate around geometric patterns revealed by radar, rectangular outlines, sharp right angles, straight corridors cut in through the irregular topography. Nature, as any geologist knows, rarely draws in straight lines. The second anomaly was magnetic. Surveys around the Vostok region detected localized disturbances, zones where compasses spun unpredictably, and magnetometers registered symmetrical pulses. The patterns were too ordered, repeating with the precision of architecture rather than geology. Some scientists suggested metallic minerals or iron deposits. Others noted that the anomalies resembled the magnetic layout surrounding the Great Pyramid of Giza, as if geometry itself could leave an echo in the field of the Earth. Then came the radar reflections. In 2018, a series of ice-penetrating radar passes over the eastern sector of the lake revealed echoes unlike any previously recorded. Normally, radar waves scatter softly when passing through natural rock or sediment, but here they bounced sharply, like light striking polished metal. The reflections formed angular shapes, intersecting at 90 degrees, forming grids that resembled chambers or walls. To the cautious, it was data noise, nothing more. To the curious, it was evidence, faint, fragile, but impossible to dismiss entirely, that beneath the ice, something built, something engineered might still exist. Theories spread quietly. If Antarctica was once warm 15,000 years ago, if rivers flowed and forests thrived,
Could it also have been home to an ancient civilization, one advanced enough to map the globe before ice erased their world? The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, yet depicting an ice-free Antarctic coastline, suddenly seemed less like coincidence and more like remembrance. If such a civilization existed, where would they have lived? Near water, near warmth, near stability. Lake Vostok would have been ideal. A freshwater inland sea, protected by mountains, rich in geothermal energy. When the Cataclysm came, perhaps the comet impact of 12,800 BC, the floods and snow buried it all. The ice rose like a tombstone, sealing whatever lay beneath in a vault of time. Even today, the Antarctic Treaty forbids drilling directly into the lake's depths. Officially, the reason is to prevent contamination. Unofficially, some whisper it is to prevent discovery. For what if the probe found not microbes, but monuments? In the stillness of the polar night, it's easy to imagine the scene. Beneath the 4 kilometers of ice, a dark expanse of water shimmers softly with geothermal light. Silhouettes rise from the silt. The outlines of columns, domes, and corridors carved by hands long vanished. No sound, no current, only the steady drip of meltwater echoing through ancient halls. And above, unaware, the modern world continues to orbit, satellites blinking, scientists measuring, humanity dreaming of the stars, while beneath their feet lies a world older than memory. Whether these stories are truth or myth hardly matters. What is real is the wonder, the fact that beneath the coldest, loneliest place on earth there is movement, warmth, and life. That the line between the natural and the impossible remains as thin as ice. Perhaps Lake Vostok does not hide a city. Perhaps it hides a mirror, reflecting our deepest longing to connect with what came before us, to believe that time does not erase, it only conceals. And so, as the winds of Antarctica wail over the endless white, the lake below remains silent, watching, waiting, dreaming. Its waters, untouched for 15 million years, ripple once, then still again, as if something beneath them has just remembered the light.
The story begins not with discovery, but with silence. In 1959, 12 nations gathered in Washington, D.C., and signed a treaty unlike any other in history, the Antarctic Treaty. It was presented as a triumph of peace, a promise that the last untouched land on Earth would remain free from war, weapons, and greed. But as with all great agreements, what was written was only half the story. On paper, the treaty was simple. It prohibited military activity, nuclear testing, and territorial claims. It encouraged scientific cooperation and environmental protection. It was, in every sense, a noble act, humanity agreeing to protect the planet's coldest frontier. Yet buried between the lines, in obscure annexes and classified protocols, lay clauses that spoke of something else entirely. Article 4, Section 2, quietly declared, "No new claim or enlargement of an existing claim shall be asserted while this treaty is in force." On the surface, it was a legal safeguard, but to those who read it carefully, it was a freeze, not of ice, but of truth. No nation could declare ownership, no one could dig too deep, and no one could expose what lay beneath without collective consent. Then came the Environmental Protocol of 1998, celebrated as a victory for ecological preservation. It forbade drilling into subglacial lakes, citing the risk of contamination. But within diplomatic circles, whispers spread of an additional clause, Annex 6, one never publicly released. It reportedly required immediate reporting of any discoveries of historical or archaeological significance to the Treaty Secretariat. What qualified as archaeological significance? No one outside the classified committee knew. Soon after, Antarctica became a continent of zones, some open to science, others sealed forever. The most notorious of these was the Wilkes-Land magnetic anomaly, located at 70 degrees 30 minutes south, 120 degrees 00 east. Officially, it was restricted because of magnetic interference affecting navigation systems. In truth, even satellites were ordered to avoid direct imaging of the region. Pilots who had flown near it spoke of their instruments spinning uncontrollably, of compasses pointing not north but down. Since 2002, it has been a no-fly zone with a 100-kilometer radius. Then there was the Lake Vostok drilling site. In 2012, Russian scientists stopped drilling just 130 meters short of the lake's surface. The reason given was contamination risk. But one of the final ice cores retrieved reportedly contained unusual materials, fragments that glowed faintly under UV light and emitted trace heat even after freezing. Within 24 hours, the drill was sealed, the samples classified, and the team ordered to halt operations indefinitely. No subsequent project has been permitted there since. Another enigma emerged over Queen Maud Land. In 2016, users of Google Earth noticed something odd: a cluster of 3 pyramid-shaped mountains symmetrically aligned, each rising sharply from the surrounding ice. Within weeks, the satellite imagery was blurred. Resolution dropped by 90%. Where there had once been clear ridges and shadows, only smooth white pixels remained. No official statement was issued. And then there was Dome C. On maps, it is the location of the Franco-Italian Concordia station, but the airspace above it is restricted to all unauthorized aircraft. Some pilots claim to have detected radar emissions, defense-grade signals, from what should be a purely scientific outpost. Around Dome C, the magnetic field also fluctuates unusually, forming a ring pattern unlike any known geological feature. Antarctica, the land of peace, had quietly become the most tightly controlled territory on Earth. Beneath its white silence, the presence of military infrastructure grew undeniable. McMurdo Station, run by the United States, is officially described as a research base.
yet its 3-kilometer runway accommodates C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft, and its hangars contain radar and encrypted communication systems. Over 1,000 personnel are stationed there, though fewer than 200 are scientists. Underground structures, visible only in thermal imagery, suggest reinforced bunkers extending hundreds of meters below. The same pattern repeats at Vostok Station, Russia's crown jewel in the Antarctic. Built for climate research, it contains an underground complex 200 meters deep, guarded by armed personnel. Its communication channels are encrypted at military grade. Official visitors are not permitted below the 2nd level. And at the very heart of the continent, sitting precisely at 90 degrees south, lies the Amundsen-Scott Station, home to the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. Its sensors peer deep into the Earth, capable of detecting subatomic particles moving through solid ice. But much of its data is classified. Even scientists who work there see only fragments of the results. Tours are forbidden, civilian access denied. From above, Antarctica looks pure, a white continent of wind and snow. But beneath the treaties, the laws, and the secrecy, it is also a vault, a place where science and power converge, where knowledge is guarded as tightly as any weapon. And the deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes. The cold is not the only thing Antarctica hides.
For decades, the official story of Antarctica has been one of research, cooperation, and ice. But every few years, someone emerges from its silence, a voice claiming to have seen something the world was never meant to know. Some are scientists, some are soldiers. All of them tell the same story in different words. We found something under the ice. The first to speak was Corey Goode, a former U.S. Air Force technician who, in 2015, claimed to have worked in what he called the secret space program. Between 1987 and 2007, he said he was flown to Antarctica as part of a covert expedition. There, beneath miles of ice, he described vast ruins, pre-Adamite cities, as he called them, with structures of metal and stone fused together, partially melted by ancient heat. According to his testimony, parts of these cities still had power. The architecture, he said, was alien in geometry, but human in purpose. Corridors built for giants, halls illuminated by a soft blue glow. The U.S. government denied his claims, dismissed him as delusional. Yet no lawsuit was filed, no retraction demanded. He simply faded back into the shadows. To believers, that silence was the loudest confirmation of all. A year later came Brian, a drilling engineer who worked with the Russian team at Lake Vostok in 2012. He was one of the few who handled the final core samples, the ones extracted from just 3,766 meters deep. In an anonymous interview in 2016, he said, "We found something at the bottom, metallic. It wasn't rock, it wasn't ice, it gave off heat." Within 24 hours, the project was halted, the site sealed. Brian disappeared the following year. No records of his departure were ever found. Then came Linda Moulton Howe, an investigative journalist who, in 2018, received a cryptic email from an anonymous Navy flight engineer.
The message contained radar imagery captured during a classified flight in 2003. The images showed what appeared to be an octagonal structure, 300 meters across, buried beneath 2 miles of ice near the Ross Ice Shelf. The sender wrote, "It's not natural. The walls are perfect. We were told never to speak of it." Howe verified the metadata. The file was real. But days after she published her findings, her source vanished from contact. Older voices had spoken too. As far back as 1966, historian Charles Hapgood devoted his life to studying the Peary Reese map, a 16th century chart showing an ice-free Antarctica. His research led him to conclude that an advanced civilization had mapped the world long before recorded history. He corresponded with Albert Einstein, who supported his ideas in writing, saying, "Your theory is fascinating and deserves serious consideration." Yet Hapgood's work was quietly removed from academic circulation, his reputation dismantled not by debate, but by omission. And then, in 2001, a seismic survey team operating in Wilkes Land detected something extraordinary, a massive dome-shaped structure beneath the ice. The data, they said, was unlike anything geological. Within days, the project was classified. Years later, one member of the team would confess, it looked like the top of something buried. More anomalies followed. In 2018, a NASA scientist leaked satellite images showing pyramid-like structures near Queen Maud Land. The photos spread online briefly before being deleted from official servers. 48 hours later, the scientist was dismissed for unauthorized disclosure of digital materials. His name disappeared from NASA's staff records soon after. For those who seek the truth, these fragments form a haunting mosaic, pieces of a story too vast to see all at once. For those who fear it, they are dangerous coincidences best forgotten. But the pattern is always the same: a discovery, a statement, then silence. Even now, those who work near the restricted zones, Vostok, Dome Sea, Wilkes Land, speak carefully. Some refuse to talk at all. A few mention lights seen under the ice at night, as if something far below still moves. And always the same uneasy question lingers in the air. What could possibly be worth keeping secret in a land of nothing but snow? Perhaps the answer lies not in what is found, but in what is feared. If Antarctica once held life, or cities, or knowledge that predates human memory, what would that mean for everything we believe about ourselves? Maybe that is why the ice remains untouched, not to preserve it, but to protect us from what it remembers. For now, the continent sleeps beneath 2 miles of silence. Satellites still circle, cameras still blur, treaties still hold, and the whispers from pilots, from engineers, from dreamers continue to drift like snow across the wind, gathering at the edge of truth. In the end, perhaps the greatest discovery in Antarctica is not what's buried below, but the fact that something there is powerful enough to keep the entire world quiet. 1959, at the height of the Cold War, 12 nations gathered in Washington, D.C. to sign a treaty unlike any before it. They called it the Antarctic Treaty, a document meant to preserve peace, science, and the purity of Earth's last untouched frontier. Publicly, it banned military activity, nuclear testing, and territorial claims. But behind closed doors, whispers spoke of something else, an urgency that no one could quite explain. The world had just entered the atomic age. Satellites were rising. Radar was stretching further than ever before. For the first time, humanity could peer under the ice. And what it saw, some believed, was not meant for everyone's eyes. By the early 1960s, both the United States and the Soviet Union had established research stations that looked remarkably like military outposts. Vast runways, radar domes, encrypted communications, all hidden beneath the language of science. The treaty's Article 4, Section 2 quietly forbade new territorial claims, but it also ensured that any discovery of significant historical or archaeological nature must be reported to a single office, the Antarctic Treaty Secretariat. Few ever asked what happened to those reports afterward. Then came 1998, the year of the Environmental Protocol. Officially designed to protect the environment, it also introduced an absolute ban on drilling into subglacial lakes like Vostok. No exceptions. To this day, the clause remains unchallenged, despite technological advances that could allow clean exploration. To some, it's about contamination. To others, it's about containment. Decades later, the air around Antarctica grew heavier with silence. Every major nation maintained a base. The Americans expanded McMurdo into a city of ice, with aircraft capable of landing anywhere on the continent. The Russians fortified Vostok Station with underground bunkers and drilling machinery guarded by armed personnel. The Europeans erected Concordia, the so-called peace station, surrounded by radar defense systems. And beneath it all, cables, sensors, and satellites whispered to each other in a language of encrypted light. Still, information found its way out. In 2018, a series of leaked NASA satellite images showed 3 triangular formations in Queen Maud Land. Within hours, the files vanished from the servers. Official statements blamed data artifacts. The scientist responsible for the upload was dismissed. His employment history erased. In 2020, a batch of emails appeared briefly on WikiLeaks, containing correspondence between research stations about non-terrestrial geometric anomalies. Within days, the site hosting the documents went offline. No backup ever resurfaced. And in 2021, a journalist from Buenos Aires disappeared while investigating shipments of drilling equipment routed to the restricted Dome Sea Zone. Her last message read only, "They're not mining ice, they're guarding something." To the rational mind, these are coincidences, administrative noise in a world drowning in data. But to those who listen closely, to the tone, not just the words, something deeper hums beneath. The kind of silence that only exists when many powerful voices agree not to speak. Today, if you fly over the southern continent, your instruments will record long stretches of magnetic interference, dead zones of data.
Google Earth still blurs entire sections of Wilkes Land, as if the digital world itself has been told to look away. The official maps show nothing, but perhaps in the blank spaces, everything that matters remains. Even the scientists who spend winters at the pole sometimes confess to a strange feeling, as though the ice is listening. They describe subtle tremors beneath their feet at night, faint pulses that rise through the bedrock, too rhythmic to be earthquakes, too regular to be chance. Maybe it's just the shifting of ice sheets, or maybe it's the heartbeat of something buried, something ancient, patient, waiting. The deeper one studies Antarctica, the more it begins to resemble not a place, but a question. A white mirror where humanity sees its reflection. Small, curious, fearful, yet desperate to know. And perhaps that's the real reason for the silence. Not to hide a secret, but to protect the fragile balance between wonder and terror. Because what if the truth beneath the ice is not about aliens or ruins or forgotten empires, but about us, about how little we truly know of our own past? Maybe the Antarctic Treaty wasn't a pact of denial, but a covenant of restraint, an agreement to let certain mysteries sleep until we are wise enough to face them. For now, the continent remains untouched. The wind howls, the stars drift over endless white, and beneath it all, 2 miles down, the ice keeps its promise. The world asks, the world speculates, and the world is met with silence.
12,800 years ago, the night sky above Earth glowed not with stars, but with fire. Somewhere above the North Atlantic, a comet, 5 kilometers wide and ancient as the solar system itself, broke apart as it entered our atmosphere. It struck the ice sheet that covered Greenland, carving a crater now known as Hiawatha. The moment it hit, the world changed. Imagine it. The comet was traveling at nearly 50,000 kilometers per hour. In a single heartbeat, its energy equaled 1 million Hiroshima bombs. The shock waves spread across 5,000 kilometers, shaking continents. The ice turned instantly to vapor, exploding upward into the stratosphere. In less than 6 hours, 1 million cubic kilometers of meltwater surged into the sea. The first waves, 300 meters high, raced outward, smashing into the coastlines of Europe, North America, and perhaps even Antarctica. Entire forests ignited as molten debris rained from the sky. For days the planet burned, and then, as the fires died, the world froze. Ash and vapor filled the atmosphere, blocking sunlight. Temperatures plummeted 20 degrees. The sun dimmed to a copper haze. For a decade, the Earth slept beneath a nuclear winter. Crops failed, megafauna, the mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the great bears vanished. In just a few centuries, 75% of large mammals were gone. The Younger Dryas Impact Event, as modern science calls it, is etched into the ice itself. Cores from Greenland and Antarctica reveal a perfect line, a sudden spike of platinum, an element rare on Earth but common in comets. Nanodiamonds, forged under unimaginable pressure, glitter in the soil of ancient riverbeds. Layers of black carbon mark global fires, while tiny glass spherules tell the story of sand turned to liquid in an instant. But data is only half the truth. Legends from every corner of the world whisper the same tale. The Egyptians spoke of a time before the flood. The Sumerians wrote of gods who fled the heavens in ships of light. The Andean myths tell of Viracocha, the god who rose from the southern sea after the darkness. And in Antarctica's silence, deep beneath the ice, the geology agrees with them all. Before the impact, the continent was warm. Its valleys held forests, its rivers fed lakes like Vostok and Willans, and along its coasts, perhaps, lived the last remnants of a civilization advanced enough to draw maps before ice erased the world. In the months that followed the comet strike, chaos ruled. Waves taller than temples swept away cities. Mountains cracked. The sky filled with storms that carried lightning for weeks without end. Survivors fled inland, searching for warmth that no longer existed. The sea rose by 5 meters, swallowing everything near the shore. Then, over the centuries, came the slow burial. As the global temperature fell, snow returned in endless sheets. In less than 500 years, Antarctica transformed from a temperate land into the frozen fortress we know today, sealed beneath 2 miles of ice, its memory preserved in silence. Science traces it in numbers. Myth remembers it in dreams. Together, they tell a story of sudden extinction and the fragility of every age that believes itself permanent. So, the question remains, what became of the people who lived there on that last warm shore before the frost? Did they vanish with the tide, or did they find a way to endure? That is where our journey now turns, to the migrations, the survivors, and the fragments of memory they left behind across the ancient world. When the great ice returned, the people of the southern continent faced a choice: perish or leave everything behind. Their cities, once glowing with life, vanished beneath snow. Yet not all were lost. A few escaped, carrying fragments of memory, maps of stars, and a language carved in stone. And as the centuries unfolded, those fragments reappeared, scattered across the ancient world. The first trail leads west, across the cold and violent sea, to South America. In the high plains of Bolivia stands Pumapunku, a place where stone defies explanation. Blocks weighing over 100 tons are cut with the precision of a laser, their interlocking grooves so exact that even a razor blade cannot fit between them. To modernize, they look like remnants of machinery rather than monuments. Archaeologists date them to around 500 AD, but some evidence, layers of soil, traces of weathering, and oral histories hints at something far older, perhaps as early as 15,000 BC. In the Andean legends, the god Viracocha arrived from the sea to the south, pale-skinned, bearded, wearing robes unlike any tribe. He brought knowledge of stonework, agriculture, and the heavens. When his mission ended, He walked back into the ocean and disappeared. To the descendants of those who lived through the flood, he was not a god, but a memory of ancestors who fled the frozen south. The second trail winds toward the east to the deserts of Egypt. Here, the Sphinx stares eternally toward the rising sun, its surface etched with marks of water erosion. Not sand, but rain. Heavy rain, the kind that fell 10 or 12,000 years ago, when the Sahara was green. Beneath its paws lies the Osirion of Abydos, a structure so ancient, so massive, that even the pharaohs built their temples atop its ruins. Egyptian myth speaks of the Zep Tepi, the first time, an era before the dynasties, before writing, when gods walked among men. But in the cool logic of geology and mathematics, that first time coincides almost perfectly with the end of the Younger Dryas, the exact time when Antarctica froze. From Egypt, the whispers continue eastward, across the Indian Ocean into the jungles of Indonesia. There, the mountain of Gunung Padang rises like a pyramid disguised as nature. Beneath its soil, radar scans reveal multiple layers of man-made stone platforms, the deepest dated nearly 20,000 years old. The local legends call it Sundaland, the sunken continent, a land that drowned long ago. Genetic clues tell the same story. Ancient DNA studies reveal traces of a mysterious lineage, the Denisovans, whose genes survive most strongly in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. It is as if the survivors of the southern cataclysm had followed the trade winds east, planting pieces of themselves in the islands before vanishing into history. And yet, the most mysterious evidence lies not in stone or myth, but in blood. Geneticists call it haplogroup X, a rare DNA signature found among the Algonquin and Sioux tribes of North America, and also in Europe and the Middle East. Strangely, it is absent in Asia, where those tribes are supposed to have originated. Its age? Between 12 and 15,000 years, the same window in which Antarctica died. Another mystery lies in the elongated skulls discovered in Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, Malta, and Crimea. The people who shaped these skulls, or perhaps inherited them, had cranial capacities 25% larger than ours. DNA tests in 2018 found that many belonged to an unknown human subspecies. Across the world, the myths about them are identical. The tall ones, the shining ones, who came from across the sea. Even the mathematics of these civilizations share the same breadth of memory. The golden ratio, the number pi, the precession of the equintices, all encoded into temples and pyramids built oceans apart. To know the precession cycle, one must observe the stars for 25,920 years. Yet civilizations separated by continents all aligned their monuments to Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades. Coincidence or continuity? Perhaps not a single empire, but a lineage of knowledge, reborn after every catastrophe, adapting, surviving, remembering in silence what the ice had buried. Maybe that's why our myths of gods and floods feel so familiar. They are not stories of divine punishment, but of survival,
of the few who carried light through the long night of the earth. And when you look at the pyramids or trace the lines of ancient maps, maybe what you're seeing isn't the work of aliens or magic, but echoes of a civilization that refused to die. The survivors of Antarctica, the last architects of the forgotten world.
The story of Earth is not a straight line. It is a heartbeat, rising and falling, expanding and collapsing, every 12 or 13,000 years. The ancients called it the Great Year. Science calls it the cycle of catastrophe. And right now, we are almost at its next pulse. 75,000 years ago, the volcano Toba erupted with such force that it darkened the skies for a decade. Humanity's numbers fell to a few thousand. 41,000 years ago, the planet's magnetic field reversed. North became south, and auroras danced over the equator. 12,800 years ago, the Younger Dryas impact reset the world once again, erasing entire species and, perhaps, entire civilizations. It happens like breathing, an inhale of creation, an exhale of destruction, the rhythm of a living planet. In our modern age, we have grown confident. We believe the earth beneath us is still, but deep below, something is stirring. The magnetic field has weakened 9% in the last 170 years. The South Atlantic Anomaly, a zone where Earth's magnetic shield thins, is widening fast. The North Magnetic Pole, once drifting lazily across Canada, now races towards Siberia at 55 kilometers per year. The Schumann resonance, the natural heartbeat of the planet, has climbed from 7.83 to over 8.5 hertz. It is as if the Earth itself is whispering, "I am shifting again." Physicist Charles Hapgood, whose ideas were once dismissed as fantasy, believed that the crust of the Earth could slip over its molten mantle, a theory so bold that even Einstein supported it. Uneven ice accumulation at the poles, he wrote, could unbalance the rotation of the planet. In hours, continents could slide thousands of kilometers, mountains could sink, and seas could rise. Antarctica, once temperate, could have slipped southward into its current polar prison. The evidence, though scattered, feels hauntingly alive. In Siberia, mammoths were found frozen mid-meal, still chewing flowers that bloom only in spring. Their stomachs preserved a moment in time, as if a warm field became an ice tomb in the span of hours. Tropical fossils have been unearthed in Antarctica, while polar plants appear in ancient layers of Africa. The planet, it seems, has moved before. If it happens again, the consequences would be beyond imagination. The seas would rise in waves 1 to 3 kilometers high. Entire coastlines from New York to Shanghai would vanish. Earthquakes of magnitude 9 would ripple across continents. Volcanoes dormant for millennia would roar awake. The sky would burn red for months. 90% of humanity could perish in a single week. And yet, the Earth would go on. It always does. It breathes, resets, heals. What ends for us might only be a blink for her. But in the stillness of that truth lies a deeper question. What can we learn before the next exhale? The civilization that once lived on Antarctica prepared. They carved knowledge into stone so that the ice could not erase it. They mapped the world with mathematical precision so that one day, when the thaw came, their descendants might find their way home. They wove memory into myth, knowing that stories last longer than empires. But they failed too. They built monuments that could endure time, but not the planet's fury. Their knowledge survived, but their world did not. We have their advantage: technology, satellites, foresight. And yet we are more fragile than they were. We depend on machines, on systems that can vanish with one solar flare. Our cities cling to the edges of oceans. Our supply chains stretch like glass across the world. We have forgotten how to live without power or silence or comfort. If another cataclysm comes, it may not be the Earth that destroys us, but our own dependence on what we've built. Still, there is hope in awareness, in the quiet realization that the same cycle that ended them also gave birth to us, that perhaps each collapse is not punishment, but renewal. The ice, after all, is not the enemy. It is memory, a patient archive keeping record of every rise and fall, every civilization that thought itself eternal, every mistake repeated. And maybe, if we listen, not with fear, but with humility, we can learn to live in rhythm with the planet again, before it turns the page.
So here we are, 12,800 years after the last great fall. The ice has come and gone, and come again. Civilizations have risen from dust and vanished back into it. But this time, the question feels different. Because now, for the first time, we can measure the heartbeat of our planet. We can see the data. We can feel the tremor before it comes. The poles are shifting. The magnetic shield weakens. The sun grows restless. And deep beneath the Antarctic crust, heat stirs, slow, steady, ancient. If the cycle repeats, what will we become? Some scientists estimate a 20% chance of a mild shift, storms, quakes, disruptions, but nothing we cannot survive. A 50% chance of a major event, coastlines redrawn, billions displaced, a world forced to begin again. And a 30% chance of something total, a reset, like the one that buried the last world beneath ice. But unlike them, we are not blind. We have satellites, telescopes, equations, memory. We can see it coming. The question is not if we can stop it, but if we can listen. History suggests we rarely do. The civilization of the ice left warnings carved into stone, spirals, stars, numbers that repeat across cultures. They tried to tell us that knowledge without humility is noise, that power without reverence collapses upon itself, that the earth is not ours, we are hers for a moment. If the poles shift again, the oceans will rise, yes. The skies will darken, the grids will fail. But perhaps that is not the end. Perhaps it is the clearing of a field before the next harvest, a pause between breaths. And when the storms settle, when the fires dim, when the air turns clear once more, humanity, or what remains of it,
We'll stand among ruins under a new sky. We will look to the stars, confused yet awake, and remember what the ancients once knew, that the world is a cycle, not a line, that endings are beginnings written in another language. Maybe that's why they built monuments that align with constellations. Maybe that's why every flood story ends with light. They wanted us to remember that survival isn't just about living, it's about continuing the story. So if the Earth shifts again, and it will one day, may we face it not with fear, but with understanding. May we protect what truly matters, not cities or systems, but the spark that made us look up at the stars and wonder. Because that is what the ice remembers, not our machines, not our empires, but our awe. And maybe when the next civilization uncovers our frozen world, thousands of years from now, they will find our satellites, our songs, our questions, and whisper as we do now. They were here, they knew, and they left us a warning. So tonight, as you drift to sleep, imagine the world turning slowly beneath the stars, patient, alive, timeless. The ice is not cruel. It is the Earth's way of remembering. And as the wind moves across the white continent, somewhere beneath 2 miles of silence, something ancient still breathes, waiting, watching, reminding us of the one truth that binds all who have ever lived. Nothing is ever truly lost, only waiting to be found again.